Hi, everyone. I'm Maria Ryder, also known as the Pleasure Principle. And I'm here today to talk about my favorite topic of all, pleasure. But more specifically, pleasure and Pavlov. So, what in the heck does that mean, right? Pavlov, if you're not familiar with his experimentation and his theory, I'll give you a really quick, vague acorn version of what he discovered, and that is the basically the idea of cause and effect in the body. And in his experiments, it was with animals, with a dog in particular. So they talk about Pavlov's dog, and what he did was every time he fed the dog, he rang a bell. And so eventually, after doing this many, many times, every time the dog ate, there was a bell. Bell, food, bell, food, bell, food, right? Eventually, what happened was that he could ring the bell and the dog would salivate. Okay, so he hypothesized or decided that this meant that the dog's body, his actual physical response system, had associated the bell with the food, right? And what I'm proposing is that this is basically true across the board for everything in our human existence, all of our life. Now, I know that's like a super bold statement, and I'm sure there's lots of examples that people can come up with that where it's not true. But the way that it's useful to me is to think through this lens of what is my system, what is my body and my brain and my thinking and my beliefs and everything learned, what has it learned, and how is that informing what it responds. Now, I don't go through and try and unravel why do I react the way I react to every single thing. More in the sense that how can I use this to my advantage? How can I use this to improve my life, to get the results and the responses that I want, right? So I'm looking at it through the lens of taking advantage of this knowledge and using it for my own benefit. So where does pleasure come in? You might be wondering. Pleasure comes in because sometimes it feels hard to access, right? There are times when we might want some pleasure, or we might know that pleasure would be useful to us and helpful to us, but it feels really hard to access. And so what I propose and what I have done myself is I have wired in some responses with pleasure. So in other words, my favorite one is I have an essential oil blend from Young Living called Jade Lemon. You can choose any scent you want, doesn't matter, but it needs to be something that's a little bit unique. Like you're not going to just randomly smell it in normal life all the time. And so what I did was I had that scent present, or I specifically smelled that scent when I was in a pleasurable state, or when I was doing something sexual or self-pleasuring or something along those lines. So when I was tapping into my sexual energy, my pleasure center in that sense, I brought this scent in. So I added it to my coconut oil, I added it to my homemade lube recipe, and I have coded into my system the association between this particular essential oil scent and sexual pleasure. So what that means is that now when I'm reaching for pleasure and it feels a little out of touch, I can bring that essential oil to my nose. I can really deep breathe into it, and it turns my body on. Okay, so I've associated the pleasure with the scent, and that's a very Pavlovian method. So you can use it literally for pleasure, or you can use it for other things. You can then also wire, do a secondary wiring. So if I need to do a task, so kind of pleasure sandwich topic here, which I have a different video on that. I need to do something and I'm feeling really resistant or really not wanting to, I can bring that scent in. It taps me into my pleasure. Now I'm in a pleasure state to do what it is that I need to get done. So it's a big topic, and this is just a tiny piece of it, but start to think about and look at ways that you can use that Pavlovian response, that coding and manipulating, for lack of a better word, your own nervous system to your advantage. So what do I want from my body? What do I want it to learn from X, Y, or Z? And how can I consciously choose that? So that's my little talk today on Pavlov and pleasure.